November 25, 2025. Deep inside Russia, at an aircraft facility in Taganrog, sat a plane that couldn't be replaced at any price. Not because it was expensive, though estimates put its value between $150 to $480 million. Not because it was rare, though it was literally the only one in existence, but because the Soviet engineers who designed it were long gone. The technology was decades old, and nobody had built anything like it in over 40 years. Russia's A-60 airborne laser platform, a flying weapons laboratory that represented decades of research into space warfare and missile defense, was parked at the Beriev aircraft facility, supposedly safe 200 kilometers inside Russian territory. Then, Ukrainian drones and Neptune missiles arrived, and in one spectacular strike, they destroyed something that can never be rebuilt. What happens when you obliterate the only prototype of a weapon system that took decades to develop? Ukraine answered that question definitively on November 25th, and the answer sent shockwaves through Russia's military establishment. Because this wasn't just destroying equipment, this was erasing an entire branch of Russia's military research tree. The A-60, the Soviet laser dream that became Putin's nightmare. To understand what Ukraine just destroyed, you need to understand what the A-60 actually was, and why losing it is catastrophic for Russia's military programs. Picture this. It's the 1980s, the Cold War is at its peak, and the Soviet Union is obsessed with one terrifying American program, Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars. The idea of space-based weapons shooting down nuclear missiles seemed like science fiction, but the Soviets took it seriously enough to pour enormous resources into their own counter-programs. The A-60 was born from that arms race. Based on an Ilyushin Il-76 heavy transport aircraft, the Soviet workhorse for moving cargo and troops, the A-60 was modified into something unprecedented. A flying laser weapons platform designed to test technologies for shooting down missiles and potentially destroying satellites. Think about the engineering challenge for a moment. You're taking a cargo plane and installing a megawatt-class laser system, the power generation, the cooling systems, the targeting equipment, the beam control optics. All of this needs to work at altitude, in an aircraft experiencing vibration and movement, while accurately directing an energy beam at targets moving at thousands of kilometers per hour. This wasn't just difficult, it was at the absolute edge of what Soviet technology could achieve. The A-60 flew its first test missions in the early 1980s. The massive turret housing the laser system was visible as a distinctive bulge on the aircraft's fuselage. You literally couldn't mistake this plane for anything else. Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, it conducted experiments on laser weapon effectiveness, beam propagation through atmosphere, and target acquisition systems. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, funding dried up, and the program went dormant for years. Putin's Russia resurrected the A-60 program in the 2000s, seeing it as a potential counter to American missile defense systems and satellite capabilities. The aircraft was modernized with updated systems, new laser technologies, and more sophisticated targeting equipment. By the 2020s, Russia was using it to test anti-satellite weapons, technologies that could blind or destroy reconnaissance satellites that Western forces depend on. Here's what made the A-60 irreplaceable. This wasn't a production aircraft you could order more of. It was a one-of-a-kind flying laboratory that represented decades of accumulated research, testing data, and specialized modifications. The engineering teams who originally designed it were retired or deceased. The Soviet-era manufacturing processes and specialized components are no longer available. You can't just build another one. The institutional knowledge, the specialized equipment, the testing data from decades of experiments, all of that resided in this single aircraft. And on November 25th, 2025, Ukraine turned it into burning wreckage. The strike, how Ukraine reached 200 kilometers into Russia. Taganrog isn't some border town vulnerable to artillery fire. It's 200 kilometers inside Russian territory on the Black Sea coast. The Beriev aircraft facility where the A-60 was stationed repairs and maintains military aircraft, supposedly protected by multiple layers of air defense and distance from Ukrainian-controlled territory. So how did Ukraine pull off one of the war's most audacious strikes? The weapons package tells the story. Jet-powered long-range drones combined with Neptune cruise missiles, a sophisticated combination that shows Ukrainian operational planning has evolved dramatically. The drones likely served multiple purposes: overwhelming air defenses, conducting reconnaissance in real time, and possibly acting as decoys to draw defensive fire away from the more valuable Neptune missiles. Ukraine's jet-powered drones represent indigenous development that's reached impressive capability. Unlike slow, propeller-driven drones that Russia's air defenses can track and engage relatively easily, jet-powered variants move fast enough to complicate interception. They can carry meaningful payloads, provide surveillance, and force Russian air defense systems to engage, expending expensive missiles on relatively cheap drones. Neptune missiles, originally designed as anti-ship weapons, have been adapted by Ukrainian engineers for precision land attacks. With GPS guidance and terrain-following flight profiles, they can approach targets at low altitude to avoid radar detection, then strike with precision measured in meters. Each Neptune costs approximately $1.5 million, expensive but a bargain compared to the $150 to $480 million target they destroyed. But the real key to success was intelligence. Ukraine needed to know exactly where the A-60 was located within the facility, when it would be vulnerable, and what defenses protected it. This requires satellite reconnaissance, signals intelligence, possibly human sources on the ground, and analysis sophisticated enough to identify the one-of-a-kind aircraft among other planes at the facility. The strike apparently hit multiple precise aim points nearly simultaneously, the hallmark of careful planning and coordination. The A-60 was destroyed. An Il-76 heavy transport aircraft worth approximately $70 million was also obliterated. Facility infrastructure suffered damage, and Russia lost something that literally cannot be replaced at any cost. The same night, a campaign, not just a strike. What makes November 25th even more remarkable is that the A-60 strike wasn't isolated. It was part of a coordinated campaign hitting multiple strategic targets across southern Russia simultaneously. Ukrainian forces also struck the Atlant aerodrone manufacturing facility, hitting Russia's ability to produce the unmanned systems they increasingly depend on for reconnaissance and strikes. Every production facility destroyed means fewer drones Russia can field and longer timelines to replace losses. The Novorossiysk oil terminal was hit again, the same critical infrastructure that exports 2.2 million barrels of oil daily and generates enormous revenue for Russia's war effort. Disrupting these operations even temporarily costs Russia tens of millions of dollars and creates uncertainty for international oil buyers. The Tuapse oil refinery was also targeted, part of Ukraine's systematic campaign against Russia's energy infrastructure. Refinery damage doesn't just affect exports, it impacts fuel availability for Russian military operations and civilian economy. Think about what this means operationally. Ukrainian forces conducted multiple complex strikes across hundreds of kilometers of Russian territory on a single night. This requires enormous coordination, sufficient weapons stockpiles to support simultaneous operations, and intelligence comprehensive enough to identify and target multiple high-value sites. This isn't desperation, it's systematic degradation of Russian strategic capabilities. Why this loss is catastrophic for Russia. The A-60's destruction represents a category of loss that's fundamentally different from even expensive conventional weapons. When Russia loses tanks, artillery, or even advanced aircraft, they can theoretically be replaced through production, eventually at great cost, but replacement is possible. The A-60 cannot be replaced. Period. The specialized knowledge required to build it is largely gone. The Soviet engineers who designed the laser systems, integration solutions, and testing protocols are retired or deceased. The institutional knowledge resided in organizations that no longer exist in the same form. You can't just hire new engineers and tell them to rebuild a unique aircraft based on decades-old technology. The accumulated experience and problem-solving from years of testing is irreplaceable. The testing data accumulated over 40 years of operations is gone. Every flight of the A-60 generated data about laser weapon performance, atmospheric effects on beam propagation, targeting solutions for moving objects, power generation, and thermal management. That data informed Russian research into directed energy weapons, anti-satellite capabilities, and missile defense. Some might be backed up elsewhere, but the platform for continued testing, the ability to conduct new experiments and validate new technologies, is destroyed. The political and propaganda implications are severe. Russia loves showcasing unique military capabilities as evidence of technological superiority. The A-60 was trotted out for propaganda purposes, featured in documentaries about Russia's advanced weapons, and cited as proof that Russian military technology could compete with the West. Now it's wreckage, and the images of its destroyed hulk are circulating globally. You can't propaganda your way out of a one-of-a-kind prototype being obliterated deep inside your own territory. For Russia's space and missile defense programs, this is a setback measured in decades. The A-60 was testing technologies relevant to countering American satellites and missile defense systems. Without the test platform, that research effectively stops or must find vastly more expensive alternatives. You can't just build ground-based testing facilities that replicate the conditions of laser weapons operating from airborne platforms at altitude. The strategic message: nothing is safe. The destruction of the A-60 at Taganrog sends messages that resonate far beyond the immediate military loss. To Russia's military establishment, your most unique, irreplaceable, strategically valuable assets are vulnerable even 200 kilometers inside Russian territory. If Ukraine can find and destroy the only A-60 in existence at a supposedly secure aircraft facility, what Russian asset is actually safe? To Russian aircraft crews and facility personnel, the bases and facilities you thought were secure rear areas are within Ukrainian strike range. Your distance from the front line doesn't protect you. Your air defenses aren't sufficient. The assets you're maintaining and protecting can be destroyed at Ukraine's discretion. To Russia's research and development programs, years or decades of work can be erased in a single strike. The A-60 represented over 40 years of laser weapons research, and it's gone. Every unique prototype, every irreplaceable test platform, every one-of-a-kind experimental system is now a potential target that Ukraine has proven it can reach. What this means for the war's trajectory. The November 25th strikes, particularly the A-60 destruction, represent an evolution in how Ukraine is fighting this war. The strategy isn't just about holding territory or conducting counteroffensives. It's about systematically degrading Russia's military capabilities in ways that will affect Russian power projection for years or decades. Every S-400 air defense system destroyed creates gaps in coverage that take months or years to fill. There are no good options, only choices between different kinds of losses. For Ukraine, these deep strike capabilities represent leverage that extends beyond immediate military effects. Every successful strike on high-value targets inside Russia demonstrates that the war's costs are not confined to Ukrainian territory. Russia cannot simply grind forward with conventional operations while its strategic depth remains secure. Ukrainian weapons can reach Russian aircraft facilities, oil infrastructure, production plants, and apparently even one-of-a-kind experimental aircraft parked 200 kilometers inside Russia. If this analysis of Ukraine's most audacious strike yet resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more coverage of how this war is reshaping modern military strategy.